Welcome to the Wife Stories YouTube channel. New video every day, and don't forget to subscribe. Here we go.
It was your lesson. The shower hissed through the bathroom door, and I stood in the hallway, still holding the half-buttoned shirt I'd planned to wear tonight. The sound of running water felt louder than any roar I'd heard in my life, because it hadn't been me who turned it on. Inside, I knew Rebecca was there. But this time, she wasn't alone. A part of me wanted to fling the door open, confront them right there. Yet I froze. My hand clutched the doorknob so tight, I thought the metal would bend. Time stretched into a slow, mocking ripple. I could practically hear each individual drop of water striking the tiles. That hot, humid mist curling under the door felt like a betrayal in itself, creeping into the corridor. It was as though the entire house was letting me know she'd chosen him, that I had no place in my own home anymore. Something heavy sank in my chest. I leaned closer. At first, I heard just the water beating down, then hushed voices. Her voice, a lower murmur that couldn't belong to me. They were close, intimately close. My jaw clenched, and a wave of nausea tinged with adrenaline rolled up from my stomach. I wanted to stop time right then, walk away before I confirmed what I knew. But time doesn't stop for anyone. Time is that unstoppable force that either cements your marriage or slowly rots its foundation. And tonight, it had sped up into a nightmare I couldn't escape. I don't remember consciously deciding to open that door. I only recall stepping forward, hearing the faint squeak of the hinge, and seeing them behind the glass shower walls. The bathroom mirror was foggy, but not enough to hide the shapes moving in the shower. His tall, muscular silhouette overshadowed hers. They stood pressed against the tiles, steam swirling around them like a twisted halo. She was up on her toes, arms draped over his shoulders. His hands, broad and sure, roamed across her back, pulling her to him. She gasped, and I saw him freeze. Rebecca's eyes flicked to the door, meeting my stare. It was an instant of pure, electric horror on her face. Then came an almost comedic standoff. Her arms still curled around him, his body half-turned in shock, the water beating them mercilessly. It felt like stepping into a photograph that burned itself onto my retina. Nobody spoke, but 1,000 words swelled inside me. My mind hammered with questions, accusations, screams of anger. My whole reality caved in around that single moment. The woman I'd built my life around, pregnant with our child, was in the shower with someone else. This was the kind of scene you read about or watch in cheap dramas, never believing it might happen to you. Yet there I was, seeing it with my own eyes. He let go of her, stepping back. She tried to say something. My name, perhaps. But I didn't let her. My throat felt tight, like I was drowning from the inside. A red haze clouded my vision, and the adrenaline spike almost made me shake. I wanted to punch him in the jaw, smash that glass, do something violent to relieve the pressure in my skull. But I just stood there, fists balled, cold fury radiating from every pore. "Get out," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. It was a tone I barely recognized in myself, like a man speaking at a funeral. Now, he turned the water off. For a second, I thought he might try to hold his ground, or threaten me back. But he didn't. He stepped out of the shower, dripping, searching desperately for a towel. Rebecca stuttered something, looking from him to me. Words like "I didn't mean," "it's not," tumbled out, but none of it made sense. The door was wide open, letting steam billow into the hallway. It felt suffocating. He wrapped a towel around his waist, water pooling at his feet. "Look, man," he started. "Shut up," I cut him off. My eyes shifted to Rebecca. She covered herself as best she could, but the damage was done. "Both of you, just get out." Her expression twisted as though she wanted to cry or apologize, maybe both. The confusion was plain on her face. She was my wife, my pregnant wife. I still remember the day we learned she was expecting. We both laughed, hugging on that same bathroom floor. We looked forward to starting a family. We'd been happy. I believed every second of it. Now the entire world felt like it was dipped in cold lead. I stepped back to let them pass, to get the hell out of my line of sight. They stumbled through the bedroom, rummaging for clothes in an awkward rush. I waited in the doorway, arms crossed, heart pounding so hard it almost deafened me to everything else. Water dripped onto the carpet. Time moved so slowly that each second felt like a year. The overhead light flickered, and the clock on the nightstand ticked, each click a miniature hammer to my eardrums, counting down the end of my marriage. My breathing sounded harsh and ragged. I wasn't sure if I wanted to scream or smash something. The only real clarity I had was the surety that I would never see them the same way again. Never see her the same way. He dressed faster, pulling on his shirt inside out at first, then fixing it. She wrestled into a bathrobe, hair soaked, rivulets of water running down her neck. Neither looked at me. Then, in the hallway, he turned, as if to say something more. I stared at him, wordless, controlling the tremor in my fists. The words locked behind my teeth were violent and raw. Rebecca put a hand on his chest, urging him to go, and he did. The door shut behind them, leaving the house quiet except for the drip, drip, drip from the bathroom. I heard her muffled whisper in the living room, him muttering curses under his breath. After what felt like a lifetime, the front door slammed. The echo rang through the empty space. She was gone. He was gone. And I was alone. That was the moment I realized how much I resented time for not stopping. It just kept pushing forward, indifferent to everything we'd built, everything that had just imploded. I stood in our bedroom, the one we'd shared for 3 years, feeling like a stranger in my own life. The ring on my left hand felt too tight. The air carried a trace of her shampoo, mingling with the scent of sweat and betrayal. I closed my eyes, trying to steady the furious pounding in my chest. It was a dizzying swirl of images, her laugh, her smile when she told me about the baby, the day we picked out the color scheme for the nursery. And now her trembling lips parted for another man under my showerhead. I couldn't stay in that room. I needed to move. So I turned on my heel, walked down the hallway, and threw open a window in the living room. Fresh air tumbled in, chilling me. The city lights flickered outside. Our shared tablet lay on the kitchen table, screen lit by a message notification. My fists still clenched. I strode to it. The messages scrolled up like a taunt. They wouldn't let me leave right away, can you imagine? Relax, you're free now. He won't suspect a thing. Just say it's a girls' night. Your wedding, your rules, babe. I skimmed them in a numb, detached way. The whole conversation confirmed my worst fears. A late-night club, a scuffle with some bouncer or jealous boyfriend, a blur of excitement. And he had been right there at the center of it, stirring up a rush of adrenaline she apparently craved. It was so bizarre, reading her words. We'll figure out a story for him. He's so trusting. My stomach lurched. She mocked me as gullible. I felt like some naive bystander while they partied, fought, and carried on a secret I'd never suspected. I wanted to hurl the tablet across the room, watch it shatter. Instead, I turned off the screen and set it down gently, surprising even myself. The rage churned inside, but a deeper kind of anguish was creeping in. My entire life felt like a lie. Everything I believed about us, our marriage, the family we were about to start, shattered. I recalled telling myself 100 times that we could make it work, that we were strong enough for anything. My father's death had taught me the value of loyalty, and I believed I found it in her. Now I was left with a hollow certainty that all those illusions were just illusions. I wandered into the small closet in the hall. There, on top of a shelf, was my brand new pajama set, the one I'd bought 3 days before our wedding. Blue, checkered, soft cotton. I still remember the day I bought it. I joked that it was marriage attire, ironically separate from the shared bedtime routine. She'd laughed, said something along the lines of, "Oh, we won't need separate pajamas that often." That memory felt like salt in a raw wound. I pulled the pajamas down, pressing the fabric between my fingers. At the time, I'd had no idea how symbolic it would become. Time is the enemy, I thought. It marched me straight into this heartbreak and forced me to see the truths I'd been too blind to notice. My father used to say that once trust is cracked, it never truly mends. I never wanted to believe him. But there I was, living proof of how quickly trust can vanish. I went into the nursery we'd begun setting up. The walls were still bare, painted a soft yellow we thought would be perfect for a child of uncertain gender. In the corner, a stack of baby clothes we'd bought on sale. All those little footies, hats with cartoon prints. My breathing caught. I sank onto the lone rocking chair, the only piece of furniture in the nursery. My body felt shaky, as though the reality of what I'd seen in the shower was finally sinking its claws into me. She was pregnant with my child. Or so I believed. But how certain was I? My mind spiraled. Could it be his? That single question stabbed deeper than any betrayal. I felt a wave of sickness roll through me. Night had settled heavily by then. The walls of the house gave off that dim hush, the kind that often feels comforting. But tonight, it was a prison of my own thoughts. I stared at the dark window, feeling more alone than ever. My phone buzzed, rattling on the table. I glanced over. Rebecca's name glowed on the screen, then vanished. She tried calling again, left a voicemail. I didn't pick up. I couldn't. If I heard her voice, all the rage and heartbreak would crash down on me. So I let it ring itself out. Eventually, I stood and found myself rummaging through the closet for anything to wear outside. A jacket, a pair of comfortable jeans. I needed to leave that house. I needed air, space, somewhere she wouldn't find me. So I grabbed my car keys and stepped into the chilly night, the library. Of all places, I ended up going there. It was this old building with squeaky floors, a place that had always calmed me somehow. That night, it felt like a desperate refuge. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow on the tall stacks of books. A few other late-night wanderers milled around. I forced myself to breathe slowly, trying to push back the image of her in the shower. I needed something to ground me, to remind me that my life still had meaning beyond that heartbreak. I drifted into the children's section, unbelievably. I just wanted to distract myself with something pure, untainted. The irony struck me that I was selecting a book for my unborn child, uncertain if the child was even mine. My eyes scanned bright covers, stories with smiling animals, big letters. My gaze settled on one about forest creatures and a mother bear promising never to leave her cub. I felt a lump in my throat. I carefully took it off the shelf and held it to my chest. I remembered being a kid, reading picture books with my own mother by my side. The memory sharpened the ache of betrayal. Our child wouldn't have that security if everything fell apart. But perhaps that was exactly what I needed. A reminder that not every promise is broken. Some mothers do stand by their children. On an impulse I didn't fully understand, I checked out that book. The librarian, a gentle older man, gave me a curious look. He must have noticed my hollow eyes or my trembling hand. But he only said, "Have a nice night." I managed to nod. Those trivial pleasantries felt almost insulting compared to the storm inside me. Back in the car, I felt my phone buzz again and again. Notifications stacked up. She was frantically trying to reach me. I turned the phone off, letting the darkness envelop me. I sat there for a long time, the library's parking lot empty, my mind replaying every sign I might have missed. I recalled how she'd been going out more often lately. "Just the girls," she would say. She'd be gone half the night, returning with some silly story about a club or a lounge. I never questioned it. Trust is so easy to exploit when it's absolute. I drove aimlessly after that. The roads blurred under the streetlights. I passed our favorite diner, the park where I proposed, the craft store where we picked out baby shower decorations. Each place was soaked in memories that now felt false. Eventually, I pulled into the driveway just before dawn. She wasn't there. She must have gone to her friend's place, or maybe to his. My stomach twisted at the thought, but my mind was made up. I wouldn't give her the courtesy of a conversation right now. I locked the door behind me, set the child's book on the coffee table, and dropped onto the couch. For a few minutes, I listened to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Sleep took me like a slow drowning. I woke to the jarring ring of the doorbell. Gray light filtered through the blinds. My back ached from the cramped couch, and my mouth felt dry as dust. The doorbell sounded again. I stood, barely aware of my surroundings, ran a hand through my hair, and opened the door a crack. There she was, Rebecca, hair disheveled, eyes red from crying. She looked as if she hadn't slept either. "Can we talk?" she asked softly, voice trembling. I stared at her. A twisted part of me marveled that she had the gall to show up here, but another part felt pity. "I have nothing to say," I replied. My voice sounded rough, like gravel. Her eyes flicked to the inside of the house. I realized I was still wearing yesterday's wrinkled shirt. She noticed my unsteady posture. "Please," she insisted. "5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." I stepped back. The silent invite was my compromise. She slipped inside, hugging herself as though the air were cold. I noticed for the first time how tired she looked. For a moment, I recalled that she was pregnant, maybe around 12 weeks. The bitterness gnawed at me. The child I used to celebrate. Now, I wasn't sure what to feel. She turned to face me. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted you to find out this way." I let out a cold laugh. "But if it hadn't been that way, you were fine letting it continue. Is that it?" She flinched. "It's not that simple," she said, voice cracking. I got swept up. I was afraid. I'm not proud. I'm so sorry. I never stopped loving you." Words like knives stuck in my throat. My hands itched to fling something across the room, to break the last illusions in front of her. "Love," I echoed, almost spitting out the word. "That's what you call sneaking around with a personal trainer, taking him to the clubs, hooking up in our shower." "It wasn't planned," she said, tears slipping down her cheeks. "We met through a friend. He was exciting, so different from—" She stopped herself, swallowing, as if she realized how that might sound. I was scared. About the baby. About the future. I just needed some rush. "A rush," I muttered. My temples pounded with anger. So my trust, our vows, meant nothing. Just an afterthought while you chased excitement. She shook her head vigorously. No, that's not fair. Everything meant something. I was just—" I cut her off, not wanting to hear the rest of her excuses. The pain in my chest felt like it might burst. "Enough," I said, stepping away. "It's not fair. You're right. I didn't get a choice in this. You made that choice for both of us." She broke down in front of me, shoulders trembling, tears streaming. A wave of conflicting emotions slammed into me. Part of me hated seeing her in pain, but the other part wanted her to feel it, to understand the devastation she'd caused. We stood there in the living room, the clock ticking on the wall. Time again, always moving, always dragging us forward. My resentment toward time flared. If only it could rewind. If only I could re-experience that day I proposed, or the day she said we were going to have a baby, to see if there were warnings I was too blind to catch. She reached out to touch my arm, and I instinctively pulled back. That single rejection made her sob harder. "I understand if you hate me," she whispered. "But the baby—" I tensed, every muscle locked. "Don't talk about the baby," I snapped. "Not now." She looked like she might collapse under the weight of those words. "John," she pleaded, "we have a wedding date set for the day after tomorrow. Our family is coming." "Stop," I said, voice trembling with fury. "There's no we anymore. I'm not going to stand at an altar and pretend everything's fine. I won't be there." The color drained from her face. "What do you mean?" "I mean exactly what I said. I growled. I'm done. You can marry your excitement, your damned delusions. As far as I'm concerned, that wedding is off. The silence that followed was deafening. She stammered. People have already flown in. Our parents. The reservation at the venue. I shook my head, a bitter smile twisting my lips. Let them celebrate your day if you want, but I won't be there. She opened her mouth to argue, but there was no point. She saw it in my eyes. Something had died in me last night, something that no tears or apology could fix. She might have thought I'd relent or show her mercy for the sake of the baby. But everything felt too broken. My father had once told me, after heartbreak, a man either stands tall or crawls. I wasn't about to crawl, not after seeing her in the shower with him. A phone chimed from her purse, a text or maybe a call. She glanced at it, then back at me. You can't do this, she said. We can work this out. I'll end everything with him. I'll prove to you. I stepped aside, motioning at the door. Go pack your things. Do whatever you need. But I'm gone. My own voice carried a finality that made even me flinch. She made a strangled noise, half protest, half despair. For a moment, I thought she'd fight me on it, maybe scream. But then she pressed her hands to her face and nodded, as if in numb resignation. She turned, and without another word, left through the front door. That final slam reverberated in my chest, a drumbeat of finality. I stood in the living room, teeth gritted, shoulders tense. The space suddenly felt foreign, as though her presence had been the last thread tying me to any sense of home. Now that it was severed, it was just walls and furniture, meaningless. I paced a while, heart pounding in my ears. Eventually, I sank onto the couch. My phone buzzed again. This time, I lifted it. A text from my younger sister. Hey, I'm arriving tomorrow for your wedding. So excited. Another text from my mother. Can't wait for the big day. Your father would be proud. I threw the phone aside. My father wouldn't be proud of this disaster. Guilt tore through me. Guilt for failing to keep a promise, for letting a family tradition crumble. But this was no small mistake. This was the ultimate betrayal. I couldn't just plaster a smile on my face and go through with the ceremony. I refused to lie that boldly. A wave of bitterness bubbled in my chest. Time marched on, and by tomorrow, more family members would trickle into town. Everyone eager for the wedding. Everyone expecting a joyful celebration. I closed my eyes. I didn't know who I was anymore. The good man I tried to be, or the bitter, vengeful fool who just wanted to watch her suffer the consequences. I set about packing. I grabbed a duffel bag, stuffed in clothes, a few essentials. I'd vanish for a while, maybe check into some cheap motel or drive out of town. Let her come back to an empty place, see how she liked that feeling. My mind churned. The pajamas, the brand new ones, caught my eye where I tossed them on the couch. And beside them, the children's book. I hesitated, picking up the book. The cover illustrated a mama bear holding a cub with a silly rhyming title. Inside, the mother swore never to leave her baby alone. Anguish knotted my throat. Our child might never have that. Or maybe it would, but not in the way I'd once dreamed. The anger in me surfaced like a fresh wave. I scribbled a note on the inside cover. You had everything, and you destroyed it. Forgiveness was my gift. I'm taking it back. It was a savage sort of declaration, but I meant every word. I refused to let her think I'd calm down after a few tears. Let her live with that guilt, live with the knowledge that she threw away her chance at a faithful life. I dropped the pajamas onto our neatly made bed, placed the children's book beside them. Then I threw on a jacket, grabbed my keys. As I stepped out, I paused. The entire apartment seemed too silent, like a set waiting for actors who would never come. A single note came to mind, some final punctuation on the heartbreak. From a side table, I found a sticky note. On it, I wrote, main character or villain. Your call. I'm done. Maybe it was cruel. Maybe it was too raw, but I wanted her to feel that sting. Without further hesitation, I left. When the door clicked shut, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I let it out so forcefully that my chest hurt. The corridor smelled of stale air and disinfectant. My footsteps echoed as I headed toward the elevator. In a corner of my mind, I saw an image of her returning hours later, exhausted, expecting to talk things out. And instead, she'd find only emptiness, pajamas, a children's book about a mother's promise. Out on the street, day had fully broken, the sun trying to shine through a haze of clouds. I headed to my car. My phone vibrated. I glanced at the screen. A call from my best man, who was probably making sure we were good for tomorrow's rehearsal dinner. I couldn't handle that conversation. I ignored it. Then there was a text from my mother, saying she was already on her way. I got in the car and started the engine. The radio came on, blasting some upbeat pop tune that felt like a cruel joke. I switched it off. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. My father's words echoed in my mind. Love is a promise you keep every day. I used to treasure that notion. Now, I'd watched my wife break it as if it were nothing. My identity as a husband, as his soon-to-be father, was up in the air. I'd lost my anchor overnight. I drove out of the city, letting the traffic pass me. My phone kept buzzing, but I didn't answer. I passed the exit for the wedding venue, a place on the edge of town near a scenic lake. I pictured the crowd gathering, the archway we'd chosen, the tables we planned to decorate with daisies. All of it felt like a black hole now. Let it crumble without me. I wanted no part in that charade. I pulled into a rundown motel an hour later. It was the kind of place where you pay cash and don't expect a receipt. The neon sign flickered. Half the letters burned out. Something about it felt right, like a place for men whose illusions had been shattered. I parked near the door, stepped into the dank lobby. The clerk barely acknowledged me, sliding the key across the counter after a perfunctory exchange. Room 106. It smelled of stale tobacco and cheap disinfectant. The curtains were a hideous mustard color, and the bed squeaked under the slightest weight. I tossed my duffel on the floor, sank down on the edge of the bed. My phone had more missed calls and texts. My sister, my mother, even a coworker who'd apparently heard some rumor about wedding trouble. Then there was Rebecca's name, repeated over and over with desperate pleas. I turned my phone off again. The tide of the world had become too much. So I sat in that dim room, staring at the water stain on the ceiling. Hours slipped by without me realizing. I was locked in an internal argument with myself, wavering between heartbreak, fury, and a strange pity for her. My mind spun in circles about the child. I wanted to be a father, but how could I be one if I couldn't trust the mother? Night fell, and still I remained in that same spot, the flickering lamp providing the only illumination. I drifted into a restless sleep, haunted by images. The shower glass, the two silhouettes locked in an embrace, the unborn child. A few times, I jolted awake, chest tight with panic, as though it were all some twisted dream I couldn't escape. When morning came, I felt an odd cold numbness. My phone was dead by then, so I plugged it in. I knew the wedding was set for the following day. The dread gnawed at me. I imagined the out-of-town guests, the florist delivering bouquets to an empty venue. Part of me found twisted satisfaction in letting everyone see how she destroyed our plans. Another part felt guilty for that. But I didn't move from my self-imposed exile. Around noon, I got a call on the motel phone, which startled me. The clerk said someone was asking for me in the lobby. My heart hammered. I worried it was Rebecca, or maybe my mother. But it turned out to be my best friend, Nick. He tracked me down, presumably through my license plate or a stroke of detective work. He asked the clerk to call my room, ignoring the side-eye. I told him to give me 5 minutes. Nick looked exasperated when I finally appeared. He was in his usual button-up shirt and jeans, the attire he planned to wear for the rehearsal. "What the hell, man?" he said, voice edged with concern. Your phone's off. Your mom's freaking out. Your sister's in tears. Rebecca's calling everyone, saying you disappeared. I stared at him, arms crossed. I didn't disappear, I said flatly. I left. That's different. He sighed. Dude, talk to me. What's going on? Did you two fight? My mouth tasted bitter. She cheated. I caught her. In our shower. Nick's eyes widened, shock turning to anger on my behalf. Christ. Are you serious? I nodded. I caught them, Nick. Full on. She was with some guy named Mike. A trainer or something. And we're supposed to get married tomorrow. She's pregnant. Maybe with my kid. Maybe not. Who knows? Nick rubbed his temples. Holy. That's messed up. He exhaled slowly. No wonder you bailed. I sank into a battered chair by the motel window. I don't know who I am anymore. Everything feels worthless. He pulled up another chair, sat across from me. Look, I don't blame you for leaving. But you gotta do something about the wedding. People are here, man. Your mom's worried sick. She said you wouldn't answer her calls. I know. But what do you want me to say? My voice rose in frustration. Hey, everyone. Thanks for coming. But the bride slept with some random guy in our shower, so no wedding. Sorry, no refunds on travel expenses. Nick shrugged helplessly. I get it, but you can't just vanish. You have to handle it. Otherwise, you look like the jerk. She might spin the story. I was silent, chewing on that possibility. Rebecca could paint me as the runaway groom if she wanted. People might pity her, see me as an unstable fiancé. My parents might never know the truth. That thought fueled my anger. Fine, I muttered. I'll tell everyone the truth. She can deal with the fallout. Nick looked conflicted. Maybe you can handle it in a more private way. No, I said, cutting him off. She made it public when she told me everything was fine while hooking up with another man. Let her see what it's like to have the rug pulled out from under her. He nodded slowly, as if not wanting to argue. All right, let's do it your way. But at least let your family know you're safe. Let your mom know you haven't been mugged or something. She's your mother, man. I nodded, feeling a pang of shame. Yeah, I'll call her. Nick gave me a supportive squeeze on the shoulder, then left me alone in the stale motel room again. The quiet pressed in. I grabbed my phone, which was charged now, and called my mother. Predictably, she was frantic. John, dear God, are you okay? What's happening? I told her I was safe, but not marrying Rebecca. She gasped, demanded an explanation. I kept it concise. She cheated, Mom. I can't marry her. Mom tried to console me, asked if I was sure, asked me to talk to her father, but I refused. I told her I'd meet them for dinner tonight to explain in person. She reluctantly agreed, voice trembling. Hanging up, I felt a hint of relief. At least my parents knew I was alive. The wedding was effectively canceled, but I needed to make it official. So I texted my sister, I'm safe. Wedding is off. We'll explain later. I switched off the phone again, not wanting to hear from Becky. She had no place in my thoughts now, except as a symbol of betrayal. I mustered the energy to shower in the dingy motel bathroom, ironically flinching at the idea of running water. My mind flicked to that horrifying image. Her body pressed against him, steam swirling around them. I tried to shake it off, scrubbing my face with the cheap soap. My reflection in the mirror looked older, harder. The circles under my eyes were dark. My father's words about promises kept echoing. I guess I was the fool, I muttered to the mirror. Later that evening, I drove to a nearby restaurant where my family was staying. I kept my eyes down as I walked in. People recognized me. Some from out of town had already arrived for the wedding. A few came over to greet me enthusiastically, only to recoil when they saw the look on my face. I told them we'd talk. They stepped aside, uneasy. I found my mother, sister, and a few cousins at a large table. They looked simultaneously relieved and terrified. I sat down, folded my hands, and told them quietly, Rebecca cheated. It's over. There's no wedding tomorrow. Gasps and murmurs of disbelief spread around the table. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Are you sure? I mean, are you absolutely certain? My jaw tightened. I'm sure. I walked in on them. She admitted it. I can't stay with her. No one questioned me after that. Some tried to ask for details, but I shook my head. Enough. I'm telling you so you know I'm not just vanishing. Please tell everyone else that the wedding is canceled. I won't see her again. We sat in tense silence. My mother wiped tears. My sister placed a hand on my arm. I'm so sorry, she whispered. Anything you need, just let me know. I nodded, though my eyes stung with unshed tears of my own. The betrayal cut deep, but seeing my family's heartbreak made it even heavier. They'd planned on celebrating with me. Now they were left in the wake of a disaster I hadn't chosen. I'm sorry, I told them. I never wanted this. They offered to let me stay in one of their hotel rooms, but I refused. I told them I needed space. We parted ways with long embraces, silent understanding. I could feel the pity in their eyes. Part of me hated that pity. I wanted to be strong, to show the stoic face of a man who couldn't be crushed. But inside, I was close to breaking. Early next morning, the morning of what should have been my wedding day, I woke up in the motel, feeling a raw emptiness. The day was bright. A mocking sunshine spilled across the parking lot. My phone had about a dozen missed calls from unknown numbers, probably vendors or guests. I ignored them. This day, ironically, was the day I'd once counted down to with excitement. Now it was a day I wanted to skip entirely. I thought about the child, about fatherhood. I felt a dull ache. How could I just walk away from that responsibility? But the trust was annihilated. Was I supposed to co-parent with a woman who did that to me? My head throbbed from the labyrinth of possibilities. No part of me wanted to see her face again. At the same time, the unborn baby was innocent. My swirling emotions threatened to crush me. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, head in my hands, breathing through the surges of anger and sadness. Then I remembered how she'd looked in the shower, moaning for someone else, arms locked around his neck. That memory kindled a fresh wave of rage. I tried to steady myself, repeating in my mind that I had to do something final, something that closed this chapter for good. I dressed slowly, pulled on the same jacket. On a whim, I picked up a pen and scrap of paper from the motel notepad. I wrote a single line. You wanted to be free. Congratulations. I didn't sign it. Then I headed out. I drove back to the apartment. My heart pounded as I climbed the stairs. The door was locked, but I still had my key. Inside, everything was quiet, exactly as I'd left it, except her suitcase near the couch. She must have come back at some point, left the bag there, or maybe she was planning to pick it up. The pajamas were still on the bed, neatly folded now, and the children's book sat on top, open to my handwritten message. My note apparently read, You had everything, and you destroyed it. The sight made me swallow hard. It was one thing to write it in the heat of the moment, another to see it in broad daylight. I wandered through the apartment, checking rooms. Rebecca wasn't there. Maybe that was a mercy. I headed to the kitchen, found a notepad we used for grocery lists. I scrawled the same line. You wanted to be free. Congratulations. I slapped it down on the kitchen counter. The front door clicked behind me as I walked out, leaving the key on the table. No more illusions, no more trying to salvage anything. I was done. I drove downtown, letting the city pass by without really seeing it. My emotions whirled. Regret, fury, heartbreak. This day would be the talk of extended family. My mother would console them, tell them her son was a good man who'd been blindsided. But that was the least of my worries. All I could focus on was the knowledge that my wife, my pregnant wife, had chosen to destroy our vows, and all the illusions about who I was, a loving, trusting husband, felt like someone else's story now. Time hammered at me. I felt it pushing me forward. No matter how much I wanted the world to pause while I processed this meltdown, it refused. The day wore on. I wound up at a local diner, the same one where we once had late-night milkshakes. I stared at the empty booth we used to share. Then I ordered coffee, black and bitter, matching my mood. The waitress gave me a curious look, probably seeing the lost expression in my eyes. But she didn't pry. I still remember how, once upon a time, I believed love was the glue that would hold me together, that I could endure any storm if I had her by my side. I told myself that my father's passing had taught me the importance of cherishing loved ones. Now I realized I'd been cherishing a lie. She'd given in to her impulses and let me become a background character in my own life. Finishing my coffee, I paid and left. Outside, the sun was high, cutting through a crisp spring sky. I glanced at my phone. More messages, more missed calls, even from her father. I had no interest in explaining anything to him. The only person I cared about was the unborn child. Eventually, I'd have to figure out if that baby was mine. But that was a problem for another day. Right now, I was consumed by the need to reclaim my dignity. I drove endlessly out of town, letting the miles accumulate under my tires. Fields and wooded patches replaced the sprawl of suburban houses. The radio played an old classic rock station at low volume. My mind drifted to the future, uncertain and bleak. Would I start over? Would I ever trust again? At times, the weight of betrayal pressed so hard on my chest, it felt like I might suffocate. I stopped at a small scenic overlook. The view was of a wide river winding through a valley. A hawk circled overhead, free and unburdened. I stood at the railing, inhaling the fresh air. Time still marched forward. But at least here, away from the chatter of the city, it felt a bit kinder. My anger slowly melted into a sad acceptance. Maybe that's the final stage. Learning to live with the heartbreak, forging a new identity from the wreckage. Night fell again, and I found myself returning to the same cheap motel. The neon sign flickered a faint welcome. I stepped into my stateroom, tossed my jacket aside. On the nightstand, I saw the notepad where I'd written that final line. It felt almost cathartic, like I'd severed a bond with her. I lay down, hands behind my head, and stared at the ceiling. The overhead light buzzed. Outside, a dog barked, and I finally allowed myself to cry. Heavy, silent tears in the solitude of that cramped room. It felt like the first time since childhood that I'd let grief shake me that hard. What was left for me now? Who was I without her? That question burned. The man who believed in forever had died in that shower confrontation. I was raw, uncertain, angry. Tomorrow, the day after the canceled wedding, maybe I'd see a lawyer. Maybe I'd figure out the baby question, once the dust settled. One step at a time. When morning light seeped through the thin curtains, I woke with a pounding headache, but a sense of clarity. I tossed on my clothes, grabbed my duffel, and left the key on the dresser. I had no reason to linger. I got in the car, not sure where I was going, but certain it was anywhere but here. The ring on my left hand felt like a lid weight. I yanked it off mid-drive and dropped it in the cup holder, refusing to let it rest on my finger for another mile. The city eventually swallowed me again, and I saw a few out-of-state license plates near the lake area where the wedding had been scheduled. People might still be milling around, shaking their heads at the no-show groom. The pity or gossip no longer fazed me. I was numb to it. Let them talk. Let her deal with the fallout. She wanted excitement. She got it. Finally, I parked near a quiet stretch of downtown, close to an old bookstore we used to frequent. Instead of going there, I walked until I found a bench near the water fountain. I sank down, breathing, letting my mind roam. A father passed by with his small daughter, laughing as they pointed at the pigeons. My heart twisted again. That father was everything I'd hoped to be. Now that dream was in question, overshadowed by deceit. But I told myself I'd still fight for the child, if it turned out to be mine. Because children deserve loyalty, a kind of loyalty Rebecca never gave me. I closed my eyes, listening to the splashing fountain. In the hush of that moment, I realized what I wanted most: a new start. Some semblance of peace, a chance to figure out who I was, beyond the man defined by a woman's betrayal. That alone gave me a thin ray of hope. The heartbreak was real, but maybe so was the possibility of recovery. Time could be my enemy, or maybe time could become my ally, pushing me forward until I found the version of myself that could stand strong again. The day lengthened into late afternoon. My phone beeped. A single message from her: "I'm so sorry. I never wanted this. If there's any chance, please call me." I stared at the text, heart thumping. Then I hit delete. I'd said all I needed. My silence would be my final statement. By the time the sun set, I felt lighter, though still haunted by the aftershocks. The knowledge of what she'd done, how she'd shattered the future we planned, wasn't going to vanish overnight. But I realized that maybe I didn't want it to vanish too quickly. Pain is a teacher. Betrayal is a lesson, if a bitter one. Right now, I was learning who I was when stripped of illusions, and part of me, despite the heartbreak, wanted to see that lesson through. I left that bench, got back in my car, and drove off into the deepening twilight. No final destination in mind, just the road ahead and a life I had to rebuild. In the rearview, the city lights glimmered. I thought about the men in my father's generation, the way they'd handle betrayal. Some would drink themselves numb, others would lash out. I had my own path. I'd keep driving until the horizon opened up, until I found a spot to rest and breathe, maybe far from the stench of infidelity. Let her live with that shower scene in her memory. Let her see the pajamas on the bed, the children's book with its scrawled message. Let her wonder what might have been. Because as far as I was concerned, I'd already said my piece. Time, that old traitor, was pushing me forward. I gripped the wheel with steady hands. My foot pressed on the gas, the engine rumbling beneath me like a subdued beast. And somewhere in the swirl of my thoughts, a voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, time wasn't only an enemy. It was also an open road, a second chance to become a man who didn't need illusions or false promises. A man who could stand on his own, even if it meant leaving everything behind. I let out a long breath. That was the final revelation. I wasn't sure who I was, but I knew who I refused to be. I refused to be the fool who stayed. And so I drove, headlights carving a path through the darkness, chasing an unknown dawn where I might finally find myself.